Disgraced ex-lawyer Alex Murdaugh has been sentenced to life in prison for murdering his wife and son in a case that shocked the U.S. The hearing in South Carolina came one day after a jury took less than 3 hours to convict the 54-year-old. Murdaugh's wife, Maggie, 52, and son Paul, 22, were shot at close range on their family estate on June 7, 2021. Prosecutors argued he killed his wife and son to divert attention from his financial crime and gain sympathy. Judge Clifton Newman called the case one of the most troubling he had seen and noted Murdaugh's past as a well-known member of the legal community. "You've practiced law before me, and we've seen each other at various occasions throughout the years," he said, calling it especially heartbreaking for me to learn of Murdaugh's arrest and prosecution more than a year after the murders were committed.
Obviously, this is all relevant to your final assignment. So we're going to talk about it. So until today, we've gone through face-to-face interviews as the main sort of part of interviewing the window. Today we're going to have a look at going to use an email and why they work, why they don't necessarily work, and what are the challenges and some of the things that we need to be understanding, when we are completing such interpreters. So let's start with the foreign one. Obviously, there are a few benefits to them, and they are listed there up on that slide. It's obviously less stressful for those of you who might be a little bit anxious about interviewing.
One seminal difference in policy remains: the coalition has not matched what is Labor's most important innovation promise. That is to bring together responsibilities for innovation, industry, science, and research under one single federal minister. Innovation responsibilities currently lie within the powerful Department of Education and Science, and while there is a separate industry department, it has little influence within Cabinet. This has hampered policy development and given Australia's innovation policies a distinct science and research bias. It is the scientists rather than the engineers who call the tune in innovation policy in Canberra, so it's no surprise our policies are all about boosting government-funded research and later commercializing their results.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My theme for this session is Convergence Technology Change and Business Practice. This is somewhat dear to my heart, in that I have spent much of the last 15 years involved in various aspects of technology and their impact on business, across a broad spectrum, from applications of signal processing in manufacture right through to the use of utilization data and diary applications, to improve the time utilization of the sales force.
So 2 decades later, what's changed? It's now widely recognized that just 20% of health outcomes are tied to medical care, whereas up to 70% are tied to healthy behaviors and what's called the social determinants of health, basically, everything that happens to us for that vast majority of time when we're not in the doctor's office or the hospital. Healthcare executives now routinely remind us that our zip code matters more than our genetic code. And one healthcare publication even recently had the audacity to describe the social determinants of health as the feel-good buzzword of the year.
It is about 100 years since that great Canadian-born physician Sir William Osler, Regius Professor of Medicine in Oxford, complained about the increasing influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the medical profession. He would be turning in his grave at the way the industry now dominates doctors' prescribing habits. It does this not only by direct and indirect pressure on the doctors themselves, but also by encouraging the public to ask for scripts.
And one particular crop, almond in the US and now in Australia, is transforming the world of beekeeping and of bees. What has happened is that something serendipitous came along, that people found out, that doctors found out that almonds are good for you, a confection, but it's good for you. The almond board got a very aggressive promotion going on for almonds. They actually, I just heard recently, send out sales reps to cardiologists at hospitals to promote the heart benefits of almonds. In a very good promotion of almonds, and it's legitimate promotion because they are a healthy food.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted first of all to have been appointed to this professorship. The role is going to be about public engagement in science. It is about marketing science accessible to as wide an audience as possible. It's about making it easier for our academics here at the University of Birmingham to talk about their research to the general public, and it's not just about a one-way flow of information, it very much is about dialogue.
My current research at the moment is really quite broad. I work at the interface between the arts and humanities, particularly archaeology, but trying to find questions which are difficult to answer unless you start integrating computing and visualization. So really, I work in this boundary between trying to understand cultural questions about the past, but those sorts of questions that you can't address unless you start reconstructing, start modeling and visualizing past landscapes, objects, and movement of people.
Rebuilding carbon-rich agriculture soils is the only real productive, permanent solution to taking excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. She's frustrated that scientists and politicians don't see the same opportunities she sees. This year Australia will emit just over 600 million tons of carbon. We can sequester 685 million tons of carbon by increasing soil carbon by 0.5% on only 2% of the farms. If we increased it on all of the farms, we could sequester the whole world's emissions of carbon.
These two paintings, both called sunflowers, are generally accepted as the finest of several depictions of the thick-stemmed, nodding blooms that Van Gogh made in 1888 and 1889 during his time in Arles. The first is now in the collection of the National Gallery in London, and the second is in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. Van Gogh referred to this work as a repetition of the London painting. But art historians and curators have long been curious to know how different this repetition is from the first. Should it be considered a copy, an independent artwork, or something in between? An extensive research project conducted over the past 3 years by conservation experts at both the National Gallery and the Van Gogh Museum has concluded that the second painting was not intended as an exact copy of the original example, said Ella Hendricks, a professor of conservation and restoration at the University of Amsterdam, who was the lead researcher on the project.
Jack Nicholson, playing the crazed caretaker in The Shining, makes me reach for a blanket. Now a study finds that people we find, well, creepy can actually make us feel colder. The research will be published in the journal Psychological Science. Researchers interviewed 40 college undergraduates. During each interaction, the experimenter was either chummy with the student or very stiff and professional. The investigator also alternated between mimicking students' posture, a signal of rapport, and not doing anything at all. Participants then completed a questionnaire designed to find out how hot or cold they felt. The results showed that the subjects actually felt colder when the investigator acted inappropriately or sent mixed signals. The researchers conjecture that because the brain tries to interpret social cues and purely physical ones simultaneously, people unconsciously associate ice stares and chilly interactions with actual physical coldness. So the next time you have to visit your doctor with the creepy receptionist, bring a sweater.
An economist sees the world basically through a typical microeconomic toolkit. That involves things like thinking at the margin, rationality, opportunity cost, trade-offs. Economists, like any other discipline, rules, and its own way of seeing the world. So basically economics, or economists in general, tend to apply microeconomic concepts like that to explain the way humans behave and to make predictions about the future.
Finally, we take a look at how to mix and unmix liquids at the flick of a switch. Sandrine tells us more. Oil and water don't usually mix, but the new chemical sensitive to light has been added here to blend them together. When exposed to UV light, the chemical changes its structure and becomes soluble in water. This causes two layers to form with the oil floating on top of the water chemical combo. This method should be cheaper than the current alternative, which involves using high-energy centrifuges.
What is nanotechnology? Well, a report that was put together by a combination of the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering that came out last summer identifies two topics. Nanoscience is the study of phenomena and the manipulation of materials at atomic, molecular, and macromolecular scales, where properties differ significantly from those at a larger scale. Nanotechnologies are the design, characterization, production, and application of structures, devices, and systems by controlling shape and size at the nanometer scale. So I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what a nanometer is, but loosely speaking, people think of nanotechnologies as being a sort of 100 nanometers or less.